I hope you enjoy this special episode from the Idea Citizen Summit, Community Elevates Connection, brought to you by Cohesion Smart Building Technology. Learn more at cohesionib.com.
Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Murphy Lewis. Today, I will be the moderator for Community and Connection, the future of leadership. I'm a documentarian, I am a founder and a storyteller, and today the moderator. So we're going to dive deep in how trust can be built in niche environments, niche communities, and I would even say overlooked communities. So we're going to move around from place to place. I'll start off with a quick introduction of Sonia, and then we'll let them tease out their details as we go through the chat. Sonia Vora, did I pronounce it correct?
You did. Thank you, Peter.
All right. Former Chief Human Resources Officer at the Gates Foundation, and she is current Chief Strategy Officer at BRYTR, and that is BRYTR, and brings a wealth of leadership experience in organizational strategy and impact initiatives. Vora, is it Mullen?
It is, yes, Peter.
Look at this, I am 2 for 2.
You did, Peter.
For those of you watching this, I told the ladies before I got started that I'm very dyslexic and names are a struggle, so I'm killing it today for someone who woke up at 3 a.m. Laura Mullen is a veteran marketing executive with experience in publishing, nonprofit, and I think my favorite, rare disease spaces, because I've never talked to a rare disease guru. She currently leads marketing and communication for Rare Patient Voice, whole organization. I've already spent some time on their website, a company connecting clients with patients and family caregivers for all types of research studies. Ladies, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Happy to be here.
I'm going to throw a curveball at both of you, and either one of you could take this. When you all were invited to talk about community, niche, what came to your mind? I feel like community is different for everybody. It's probably different for each one of your industries. What does it come to mind when you hear that term?
Well, for me at Rare Patient Voice, community is sort of a cornerstone of our business model. We have a community that we are continually building and growing, currently of over 180,000 patients and family caregivers who we've invited and who've accepted our invitation to sign up to take part in all kinds of research studies. So community is incredibly important to us. And we're also part of other communities, the market research community. You know, we're sort of pharma adjacent. So community, super important to Rare Patient Voice and by extension to myself as marketing lead there.
Sonia, I'm guessing for you it means different things coming from Gates and now with BRYTR. Tell me where it is for you today in 2025.
I guess the word that comes to mind is belonging. Community is where you feel like you can be your full, true, authentic self. You know, we talk a lot about in diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations, the mask, like you've got to wear certain masks because, you know, for example, at the Gates Foundation, it's very expert oriented. And so when you go into a meeting, how do you need to show up? I also, on a personal level, lived in Chicago for a long time. And when I left, I knew I was going to miss my friends. What I didn't realize was I think I had formed a little community of people that I saw all the time, like the person who cut my hair and the person that did the dry cleaning and my yoga teacher. And I didn't quite realize that there were spaces where I had developed a sense of community, and I didn't always completely appreciate it at the time. And so when I specifically think then of niche communities, I think about sort of my background in creative writing, and a very specific thing that my writing teacher always told me is you don't write for the masses, you write for one person. You write about one person and you go really, really deep. And when you do, more and more people can see themselves in it and can see themselves and begin to feel like they belong. So that's what I would sort of say the core when I think about community.
I love that approach because I'm going to go a little bit on a rant because it makes me think about my work in the last 2 years. I'm just about to publish my first book, and I wrote the book. Thank you. I wrote the book only at one person, and I've filmed 3 documentaries in the last 12 months, and I produced every single documentary thinking of one person. Now, I don't know if that's going to be successful on either front, but I feel like at least following a little bit of what you've done says that I'm headed in the right direction.
I think you definitely are. Some of the best art in the world, particularly like you hear a lot about like the classic children's writers like Robin Hood or Winnie the Pooh. They wrote it for one child that they knew, but they got so into the mind of that child and into what they care about and their passion that other children saw themselves in it too, and just take that across sort of all art. And I think business, when we'll probably get into it, but when we start talking about niche markets, even then, you just can't be too broad. I think you need to start thinking about avatars, like fully formed avatar of sort of somebody that needs what you are hoping to help them with. And you've got to start thinking about not just why they would want my product, but what else is going on in their life. Why can't they sleep at night? What do they hope their life looks like in 5 years? And we'll talk soon about, well, how do you learn how to do that? But basically, I think you're on the right track, Peter, and I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you. Laura, I shared with you the first time we met about 2 or 3 weeks ago, kind of preparing for this, why I thought rare patient voice is in a special space. And I shared an example, a personal story of my brother who has a rare disease, and that he needed connection with people that he may never meet in life. And his connection was about being around other people who live in a world that no one understands them, and that's enough. And like the niche is that no one else understands them because no one can tell that they're sick, and they're all extremely sick. When you're doing your marketing, when you're doing your business development, how do you work around your avatars, right? Like your community is more than 180,000 people, but you're still speaking to different segments in there. How do you build that marketing out?
Right. So at RPV, we have a marketing approach that is sort of client focused, and which I lead. And we have a patient advocacy team who focus on patients and caregivers and sort of recruiting them to join our community. And that's the team that goes out and meets them in the field and talks to them. It's all about one-on-one contact and communication out at disease-specific patient events. So look at where we've been before in terms of conferences and where we have the need, where we have demand from clients who are undertaking studies of a specific patient population and need to speak to those patients. It's a beautiful thing that we're able to sort of be the matchmaker between ultimately decision makers working on new treatments and patient services and medical devices that can improve the lives of patients down the road, and patients and caregivers today who, we hear from them a lot that they just really appreciate the ability to share their experiences, to be heard, and to have their experiences make a difference, a potential difference in the lives of patients down the road. So it's making that connection that means a lot to us. But it's all about looking at who we have in our community currently, what studies are taking place and what we're hearing from our clients and what their needs are, and making decisions based on working to connect our clients with the patients that they need for research. And we do that in a variety of different ways, like I was saying, conferences, our referral partner program, in which we work with nonprofits, foundations, even influencers to get the word out, and also just word of mouth. And we do a lot on social media as well. We're doing Facebook Lives, talking directly to the community, sharing about what we do and how they can benefit from taking part in research, making a difference for themselves and for people down the road. So yeah, it's a good place to be.
Sonia, tell me a little bit about BRYTR. I've spent time on the website, and I know that you guys going from stealth to launch. Tell me how you're building out those avatars to what you're able to share. What are you going to focus on first, and what are the things in common that first client has that you're going to build a community off of?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. My hope is that we grow big enough that we can actually be a client of yours one day. It's a minority-owned, female-founded organization that's really focused on the concept of food as medicine movement. The story, I'll get into another time, but the founders, through various health challenges, started just doing a lot of research on the connection between the gut microbiome and mental health. And through that, met sort of experts in this sort of emerging business. And through that, we've developed a product called Daily Launch, which we hope to launch in this fall of 25, that is sort of a one-day simple ritual that will help give you the sort of essential natural ingredients and improve your mental health. So we're in the testing phase right now. Testing is going really well. And when we start thinking now about our ideal customers, when you look at the mental health crisis, I'll just say the United States, but the numbers are staggering. The number of people, over 82% of employees in the most recent Mercer 2024-2025 Talent Trends report, 82% of employees, this is globally, say they're burned out. And there's lots of reasons for it. There's the political, there's the financial, there's job insecurity. Numbers are pretty dire for young adults, the teenagers to young adults, in terms of feeling disconnected, lonely, stressed, burned out. And so, sure, we could say, that's everybody then. But now we have to say, but who, and there are other products out there that also sort of want to do the same thing. AG1 is obviously is a huge example. Not exactly what we're doing, but definitely in the area of, sort of supplement for health. And when we think about creating a persona, I think about sort of these sort of helpful influencers on social media. Like, all you have to do is eat 60 grams of protein and 30 grams of this. And I'm like, okay. And now you're talking about like a homemaker, a caretaker at home, and they've got 3 kids and they've got bills and social and parents and all these things are happening. And you're saying, how do I figure out that I've had 60 grams of protein in a day? Is that easier than me just throwing a box of macaroni and cheese together and adding some broccoli to it? Are you solving a problem that I actually have? Or are you trying to sell me a sort of an idealized way of life? And so when we start just taking that homemaker, for example, or caretaker, and start getting much more clear on what his or her life actually looks like. They've got 2 dogs, they've got 2 kids, they've got a house whose mortgage has got to be paid every month, job insecurity, who knows if they're going to have their job. I can't give you more work to do and claim that I'm making your life better. I've got to find that balance between, yes, you're going to have to do a little bit of work to make your life better, but how do I help make that easy for you? And something that you want to do that will keep you coming back, not for sales, but for your own benefit. And so we literally just sit in a room together and just say, who is this person? What is their name? What do they look like? Where do they live? Where do they go shopping every day? Where do their kids go to school? The more and more specific you get, and this is based on hundreds of conversations that we've had with people like this, where we start getting beyond what would make your life better? They may or may not know, but maybe we can figure it out together, the deeper the questions that we ask.
So Sonia, have you already done focus groups, or will that be part of your, you've done focus groups?
Yeah,
and,
we've done, and I
market
will continue
research?
to do it, especially as we start getting ready for the next, couple of years of hopefully growth. But yes, we have met with hundreds of people.
Interesting. That's great.
Ladies, I want to transition into, I think, the elephant in the room for creating a community, which is trust. And I'm guessing, by our ages, none of us are 20. We've all failed many times or worked in organizations that have failed many times of building trust when building a brand, growing a community. What would you say are some of the critical factors to build trust, especially with something that's new, right? Like Laura, in the sense, your company's not new, but you're going into new niches probably every month or every quarter with new rare diseases, with new providers who need the studies that are introducing. And you even, Sonia, right now as, the head of strategy, you're figuring this out right now on the fly. So I guess I'll start with you, Laura. How do you work on trust? Is it consistency? Is it using their words? So you're doing these, these research studies and you're listening to their words and you're repeating their words. Sometimes that's not enough to get to 180,000 in your community.
Right. So with the patients and family caregivers, I think trust is built in a number of different ways, one of which is our dedication to protecting their privacy and protecting our data and really valuing and putting an emphasis on data security within our company so that they can be assured that if they sign up with Rare Patient Voice to take studies and be a part of research, we're not selling their information. The clients that we're working with are not selling their information or keeping their personal information or identities or anything like that. So that's on the patient side. On the business side, we're very transparent. We're a very transparent company. We have a lot of information. Peter, I don't know how deep you were able to dig on our website, but we have a lot of information on our website that most companies don't share in terms of pricing, in terms of the amount of time it takes for us to pull together the panel that a client might be looking for. So that has enabled us to build trust.
Just to highlight what you said, the very first thing that I noticed that when I went to your website was that your pricing was transparent. And it blows me away when people hide pricing today.
Same.
I just listened to a 60-minute podcast this morning from My First Million, and the person walked us through a whole bunch of amazing AI tools on how to build out a business in less than 45 minutes. And two of the tools hid the pricing. So I immediately walked away. Like, produces no trust. There's no way I want to talk to a salesperson after listening to you on a podcast. So I think that's like the drop the mic, Laura, apart from your other content, is starting off with pricing. Sonia, what have you learned from your previous work, foundation work, that applies over into what you're doing now for trust?
Yeah, I think that there are several points along what I'll call the value chain where we have idea through implementation and benefit achievement, that it's how you do it either builds or destroys trust. I think a lot of people start to hone in on when we launch, what do we want? But it starts way, way earlier than that, which is meeting people where they are in the design phase. And so there was a short story I shared with Peter and Laura, but there's a sort of a legendary story at the Gates Foundation about 10 years before I got there. They do a lot of great work with agriculture, and they'd come up with this great grain that was more nutritious, cheaper, and was good for the soil that everybody was really geeked out on. And so they did a pilot in these villages in Tanzania and went to visit after a few months and realized nobody was using it. And so they asked, why not? And ultimately, they finally started talking to the people who cooked the food, the women, the moms, and the wives. And they said, this takes double the amount of time to cook than anything else we do. We don't have double the time. So thank you, but no thank you. And it was just really this like major learning moment of, we didn't actually talk to the people that were going to use this. We just got really geeked out on the science. Exactly. And so when you start designing solutions, if you're not talking to your end user and being open, because we get really excited about ideas, we don't want people to tell us we're on the wrong path. And we've promised things to people and it all feels too scary, but better now than later. And then, I think there's a couple of other places, but I'll just like layer on and say trust in niche markets starts with language, not credentials. I am super geeked out on the science of Daily Launch, our product. It is very, very cool. And we see some of our peers really honing in on the science of it. I think for some people that's convincing, but human beings, like the way our brains are structured, our decision-making part of our brain is not in our prefrontal cortex. That's logic and processing of information. It actually sits in the emotional center of the brain, which is why community and connection and trust and storytelling are absolutely critical in order to influence people to make decisions, whether it's buying your product or changing their lifestyle or trying something new. So knowing that should really affect how you think about designing, delivering, selling, measuring, checking up on people, your customer service loop, which should be really real. One last little nugget for you two more quick things, sorry. We were rolling out a big, everybody impacted HR system in a prior company. And our head of HR said, day one, we're going to call every single person in the company. So he divided up all the lists. We had lots of names. Yes, we were still using phones at the time. It's only like 6 years ago, but still. A lot of people didn't want to do it. They were like, this is kind of weird. What if they don't answer? But we called every single person in the organization. I'll tell you, of all the things that we did right or wrong, the thing that everyone remembered was that we reached out to them on day one. And we learned a lot about, I didn't even know that we had a system. I don't know how to use the mouse. Like, I'm like, how have you been doing your job all this time? But that's interesting information. And like my final thing is, Intuit, their first product was Quicken, and they hired a lot of fancy engineers who are definitely like top of market elite talent. And day one launch, they said everyone sits on the customer service desk. And some of the engineers were like, whoa, that's not our job. That's beneath us. They said, then here's the door. Because if you are not interested in hearing how our clients are experiencing our product, from the plastic wrap to plugging it in to using it, then you are not, as they call it, in love with our customers' problems. And that doesn't have place here. And so that's what I keep thinking when I think about trust, and that phrase from Twit, which is like, are you in love with your customers' problems deeply in your bones? And if you are, people will see that, they will sense it, and that will guide you on the right path to truly providing benefits for those that you seek to serve.
Sonia, something you said just now, and also the story about the women and the grains, really resonated with me, because information is power. And on my end, patients and family caregivers are on the front lines of the diseases that impact their lives. They know if a medication is having adverse effects, side effects, or just making them too tired to get through their days. And all that information is information that people developing these products or working on improvements for treatments or new devices, they need to know that. They need to hear that from the people who are actually impacted, who have actually experienced those products or treatments or services, and can actually speak from true experience. So I think there's an element of trust there too. That information that's being relayed is coming from truth and truth from experience.
You know where my mind went with this chat around trust is it went to when you're building a brand, you're building a community, sometimes you have an enemy that you're thinking of. You're actually against somebody, right? When I created my first travel company in South America 20 years ago, we started off in the bicycle travel world. So big tours, corporate tours, day tours, long distance tours. Enemy was traditional bus tours. So our niche was not cyclists because that was too small. Our niche was everyone who doesn't want to sit on a bus and doesn't want to interact with locals, doesn't want to feel the smells and hear the language and see people laugh and how they hug and how they kiss and so forth. So how would you describe, and maybe you don't have an enemy, maybe you're not against something formally on your Canva document or on your mission and vision, but there's probably something you're against. I'll give you one more example just because I completely surprised you all with this topic, is I consult with an amazing boutique wildlife park in the middle of the United States. I think it's the best zoo in the US. And the enemy that we are against that creates trust in our client is cell phones. We are against tablets and cell phones that kids are stuck on their couch. And so the way that we beat that enemy is we get the parents and their kids to come out and create connections at a zoo. It might not be in our mission statement, but I know that's who I'm fighting. I'm fighting Netflix and YouTube. Do you all have an unspoken enemy that you're trying to create a community that all has this in common, and they know that they don't want this in their life?
I never thought about it like that, but I will say that, we were just talking about this last night, is there's a reason why the wellness industry is billions, almost trillions large. There is a lot of conflicting and spurious claims out there. There's a lot of very sincere people and people who've convinced themselves that they are sincere, even though they don't know what they're talking about. And so I'm not sure that the right answer is just adding one more voice to that, but I definitely think whether it was working in financial services before the Gates Foundation, I remember talking to a financial advisor who felt like this wasn't just about making money. He's like, my clients, they deserve to live a life of pride and dignity. They've worked hard for their money, and they've seen way too many scammers. And an 80-year-old lady who had to go back to work because someone tried to get her into cryptocurrency and it failed. Or a young couple who had to delay having a family for 5 years because someone got them into bad investments. At the Gates Foundation, we are a lot of misinformation. We've all heard about lots of misinformation around health and vaccines and agriculture innovation. Now, as I enter into the wellness field. So I guess the enemy is people who make money on other people's fears. And I know that's really broad, but there's a lot of people out there who are just, whether they want to be an influencer and get sponsors, or they have a product, or they're trying to sell. I know everything, and it goes back to the snake oil salesman of yesteryear. I've got a pill that will fix your problems. That's just not true, no matter what form that it's taking. And that there are so many other people who are ready to tell you legitimately, scientifically, repeatedly tested things don't have the same cachet as something that they heard on WhatsApp. That's really broad, but that is definitely something that we are keeping in mind as we would like to be a force against that.
Laura, any enemies that came up in your mind when I asked the question?
Yeah, I've been thinking about my answer to that question, and I'm not sure I would use the word enemy. However, what we struggle against, in some ways are the people we're trying to come together with, researchers and marketers and even scientists who are developing new products for patients, including medications and treatments. I think maybe the enemy is the feeling or attitude that, science will out and the experiences of patients doesn't matter. And that, happily is becoming an outdated attitude, but still, there are buzzwords today in our world: patient centricity, patient engagement, and those are gaining ground happily. So we're trying to bring the experiences and the insights and the opinions of patients into the world of research. As a matter of fact, we're doing a webinar with a nonprofit called Patients as Partners in Clinical Research next week, talking about patients and co-design in clinical trials. This is where patients are brought into the design phase of clinical trials and given an opportunity to have input, which is very different from years ago when patients had no say whatsoever. Enemies for me is a strong word. I think we're making real inroads in the right direction, and it's a direction that needs to be, we need to make more progress in. But certainly this is something that we, as a company and as part of the healthcare world, and Sonia, this may apply to your world as well. And people in general, have the physical and psychological experience of living with a condition, or, and that applies to mental health and wellness as well. So just bringing those insights, the value of those insights, and sort of convincing the research community that they need to be part of the mix. That's a challenge that we're a part of trying to solve.
I want to ask about specific channels, if either one of you can give examples where you've seen trust and community building work in each one of your niches. Maybe Sonia, or it's more speculative at this point based on where you're going, but maybe you have an idea. And I'll tell you, at least in where I am right now, most of my clients are in the B2B. And I notice that there's a lot of hype around LinkedIn in the last year, but where specifically trust shows up inside the virality of LinkedIn is I can see somebody's name that I know that works at a specific place, that is in a specific executive role from a specific company. And if they like or comment, that elevates the likelihood that I'm going to check out the software or the thought leader or the influencer or the business development rep. Like if Sonia and I have known each other for 3 years and she comments on somebody else, she's putting her name on that, which is different than so many other channels, right? And YouTube, I'm not going to know her handle. On Instagram, she's not going to be talking about business on Instagram, even less so on Facebook. So that is a channel that I see that is really, really building trust. Are there any channels that you both, maybe maybe you're focused on in the next quarter and the next year, but you have hopes that it's going to help you to continue to build trust?
So I can speak to that from my perspective. At Rare Patient Voice, LinkedIn is a major channel for us on the client side. We put a lot of energy and time and resources into our leadership using LinkedIn, growing their networks. Both our president and senior vice president have very large networks, and they do a lot of posting and a lot of very well thought out thought leadership pieces. I handle the company page, so I do a lot of curating of posts, following other companies, profits, and certainly on the client side, LinkedIn is almost more important than my email campaigns and my website management and other avenues. That's on the client side. On the patient caregiver side, Facebook remains the social media platform of choice. We have a very large following on Facebook. And as I think I mentioned earlier, we've started doing Facebook Lives, speaking directly to our followers, letting them know, sort of, giving them an opportunity to ask questions in a live format is very helpful.
Laura, real quick, do you all use private Facebook groups as well?
Do we use private Facebook groups? We reach out to private Facebook groups especially when we're doing that outreach that I mentioned earlier, when we're looking for smaller disease-specific support groups. We don't currently use private Facebook groups for the company. I'm not sure if I'm misunderstanding, but we have sort of one Facebook account for Rare Patient Voice.
I was asking more for private. Okay. How about you, Sonia? Any channels that you're excited about?
I think that, so I have a small sort of coaching and consulting, and Peter, I'm also writing a book, hopefully to be released later this year, tentatively titled Permission Not Required. And so from that angle, thinking about LinkedIn and particularly like Idea Citizen, and welcome everybody to this, but Idea Citizens, such a successful community that has come together, and thinking about what it means to sort of build that on LinkedIn. As Laura said, it keeps getting the reputation of the older person group, but a lot of people I know are still on their Facebook every single day and developing a private Facebook group, because some groups that I've joined begins to take life of its own, where the groups feel ownership over the topic or whatever they are talking about, that I find very appealing. So it's not so much Instagram, to tell you the truth, not yet. I do think, I keep saying this, but human beings, we're such puny creatures with like no teeth or claws or anything. Somehow we've survived the past 500,000 years. And I think in part because we are tribal, and we survive because we tell stories. We teach each other how to survive and how to move through the dangers of the world. That is just biologically ingrained in us. And so instead of these sort of really polished videos, which are very cool, I know that I really enjoy people just talking and sometimes making a mistake or mispronouncing a word. Not so often that you wonder why they turn the camera on, but enough to be real and to say, here's how you do this. I'm going to give you a couple of steps. Why don't you try it and be practical about it and not take a super long time? So whether that's YouTube, whether they're like little mini e-learning videos that you put together, that's the format, not the channel. But I do think that don't forget storytelling, making it real, just making it your voice. Don't worry if, we were just last night having a conversation about the culture that we want to build in BRYTR, and say, why do you have to be camera ready for a meeting? If you're going to have a meeting at 9:00 in the morning, why, and you want cameras on, like, why be camera ready? Why not have your hair in a messy bun or wet, or just like you have your t-shirt on? Like, why can't that be okay? Why can't we become more integrated with people's lives and be more real, vulnerable, authentic in a world that's feeling somewhat plastic and inauthentic? I think builds, as we keep talking about, there's actually a human being there we trust and we want to be connected and closer to.
Great. As we start to wrap up, I'm going to ask you all for a call to action for the listeners and the viewers from each one of you. But before we get to that, I'm going to give you a minute to think on that call to action. This should be rather simple and a little rapid fire. In terms of culture, leadership, niches, and community, kind of the topics we've been talking about today. What is your favorite part of your job in any given week related to this topic? I'll start with you, Sonia.
I love talking to people. And I love people. It doesn't feel like I always have time for that because even with AI and computers, like I have a lot of administrative stuff to do. And it just feels like half my day is like figuring out how to control my emails and my meetings and my preps and my agendas and my bills. But when I actually get out and start talking to people and figuring out what is their life like, everyone has a story. I'm just interested in people's stories. That is my favorite part of my day.
Great. Laura?
My title is Director of Marketing and Communications, and I would confess that the communications part of that is my favorite part. Figuring out new ways to spread the word about my company and what we do and what we offer, both on the client side and to patients and family caregivers. And regarding storytelling, I concur about the impact of videos. And, at Rare Patient Voice, we have a feature called the Weekly Warrior that, we post on our website and on social, in which patients and sometimes caregivers will just talk about their daily lives and what they've been through and if they are advocating, and if so, what that might look like. So I like just figuring out new ways of sharing the message and getting it out there and reaching people. That's what I like.
Fantastic.
Peter, I'd love you to answer that question actually too.
Sure. It's close to my call to action, and I think it ties back to a lot of the topics that we've been talking about, and it's probably close to a mission that I have in life, which is to help younger people be less self-critical and to find their purpose more quickly in life. I've dealt with mental health all of my life, mental health issues, and have started to figure out my purpose later and realize how I can help others. So it kind of ties to, your wellness, and specifically with Rare Patient, I'm actually doing documentaries in the long-term care space. I've done 3 documentaries where I focus on caregivers and the difference that they make for America's seniors. And my intention there is to help young 14-year-olds to 19-year-olds who don't want to work the rest of their life in retail or the next 10 years of their life in retail, go test out working in a nursing home because it's a win-win. Oh, and that's kind of where my book is. My book is aimed at young people. It's called Interns to A Players. And my agency, I have 15 people who work with me, and 13 of them were interns. So I'm really passionate about empowering like that age of 14 to about 24 to become a leader faster.
Great.
And that's kind of my community as well, my niche. All right, call to action. Laura, what would you like for the listeners and viewers to do today?
Call to action. I guess, in a more meta way, just remember that everyone has a story and has experiences to share, and they're valid. Your lived experiences are your truth and can be very impactful to others. Beyond, yes, I'm talking about rare patients and non-rare as well. But, sharing what you've been through can benefit other people, like you're talking about the, kids and interning and growing a career in a different way. I'm thinking that maybe comes from what you personally have experienced. And I think that's using your personal experience to the benefit of others. And that's really important. To drill down with Rare Patient Voice, check out our website. I can provide the sign-up link if anyone out there is interested in signing up to take part in research studies. We'd love to have you. And thank you for having me on today. This has been a really great conversation, so thank you.
Thank you. Sonia, what do you want to leave with the audience?
We didn't get as much into this as specifically as I'm about to say, like call to action, but I would say everyone on this call as a leader, think about vulnerability and authenticity. I talked about being camera ready. I talked about calling people, even if you don't want necessarily to hear any criticism because you just launched it and you want to hear good things. I also would just add, the pace of change is so rapid. We're seeing this massive exodus of people from the workforce. CEOs, I think, came out earlier this year of like the highest number of Fortune 500 CEOs have left at any other than any other time. It's hard. It's complicated. No one has the answer, even if they say they do, of what the future of the workplace looks like. It's stressful. So as a leader, you should not be expected, nor does anyone expect you to have answers. But you can't have no direction and say, I just give up. But you can say, I don't know the answer, but I have ways of figuring out how to get to a decision, and we will do this together. I want to hear your voice, and you don't have to pretend to be like me in order to tell me your opinion. There's a kind of vulnerability that is powerful leadership, and that is what I would sort of advocate for everyone as you think about how you are either managing your teams or how you're meeting with your customers or clients or even meeting with your own boss, and think about it is definitely okay to say, I don't know, but I have good ideas of figuring out how to get it done. And I know how to do it with other people. So I will just leave that there and say thank you for having me on as well.
Wonderful. I want to thank Jackie for inviting the three of us to participate
Thank you,
in
Jackie.
Idea Citizen.
Thank you, Jackie.
This is a beautiful platform and hope it lasts forever, spreading ideas that, the three of us might not have ever heard of or met. And because of Jackie, I got to hear two beautiful stories of what you're all doing. And my call to action is if you know somebody who might be moving into long-term care or senior living or a nursing home and you're worried about it, go check out my documentary, People Worth Caring About. You can find it on YouTube. We just submitted to Amazon Prime. The next seasons we're going to be submitting to Netflix. If you know somebody young and a little bit lost that sounds a little bit like me 20 years ago, have them go check it out and let them see that they can make a difference. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Laura. Appreciate it. Thank you all for signing in. Take care.